Welcome to the next part of our Dracula series. In this chapter, our friends face a terrifying truth that will change everything, as they fight to save the soul of the one they loved. Let's dive into today's story together. Dr. Seward becomes very angry when Van Helsing talks about Lucy. He feels as if Van Helsing is insulting her memory. He says, "Dr. Van Helsing, are you mad?" However, when Seward sees the sadness and kindness on Van Helsing's face, he calms down. Van Helsing explains that he is not mad. He says that the truth is much harder to accept than madness. He also says that he tried to tell Seward gently because he knows how much Seward cared about Lucy. Welcome to the next part of our Dracula series. In this chapter, our friends face a terrifying truth that will change everything, as they fight to save the soul of the one they loved. Let's dive into today's story together. They visit the child mentioned in the newspapers. When the bandage is removed from the child's neck, they see 2 small puncture marks. They look exactly like the marks that had been on Lucy's throat. Dr. Vincent thinks a rat may have bitten the child, or perhaps an unusual bat attacked him. The child also says that he wants to play with the bluffer lady. This makes Van Helsing even more suspicious. After dinner at Jack Straw's castle, they go to the cemetery. They climb over the wall and reach Lucy's tomb. The atmosphere is frightening. It is dark and silent. The flowers have died. Spiders and insects have returned. Everything feels cold and lifeless. Van Helsing opens Lucy's coffin. Seward is shocked by what he is doing. Then they discover something unbelievable. Lucy's coffin is empty. Her body is gone. Seward is surprised, but Van Helsing remains calm. Van Helsing asks, "Are you satisfied now?" Seward replies, "I am only satisfied that Lucy's body is not in the coffin." He suggests that perhaps someone stole the body, but Van Helsing wants more proof. They lock the tomb again and separate to keep watch. Seward feels cold, tired, nervous, and annoyed. Hours pass. The clocks strike 12, 1, then 2. Nothing seems to happen, until suddenly Seward notices a white figure moving among the trees. Van Helsing also rushes toward it. As Seward struggles through the dark cemetery, he finally finds Van Helsing holding a sleeping child. Van Helsing asks, "Are you satisfied now?" But Seward still refuses to believe. They carry the child away from the cemetery and examine the child's throat. To Seward's surprise, there are no wounds at all. There are no puncture marks, no bites, no scratches. Seward says triumphantly, "Was I not right?" But the mystery remains. Who brought the child into the cemetery? Who was the white figure they saw? And has Lucy become the creature Van Helsing fears? Van Helsing said, "We arrived just in time." Now they had to decide what to do with the child. They could not take the child directly to the police because they would have to explain why they were in the graveyard at night, how they found the child. So they made another plan. They carried the sleeping child to Hampstead Heath. When they heard a policeman approaching, they placed the child on the path where he would easily be found. They hid nearby and watched. The policeman shined his lantern and suddenly found the child. He cried out in surprise. Van Helsing and Seward chew. Dr. Seward could not sleep. Van Helsing planned another expedition. The next day, September 27th, they returned to Lucy's tomb. This time, they waited until a funeral ended and the cemetery became empty. When the sexton locked the gate and left, they knew they were alone. Seward thought, "This is madness. Why open the tomb again when we already know the coffin is empty?" But Van Helsing continued without hesitation. Van Helsing opened the tomb. Then he opened Lucy's coffin again. This time, Seward was horrified. Lucy was inside the coffin. She looked exactly as she had before her funeral. In fact, she looked even more beautiful. Her lips were bright red. Her cheeks had a healthy color. She did not look like someone who had been dead for a week. Seward asked, "Is this some kind of trick?" Van Helsing replied, "Are you convinced now?" Van Helsing pulled back Lucy's lips. He showed Seward her teeth. He said, "Look. They are sharper than before." He pointed to her canine teeth and explained, "With these teeth, the little children can be bitten." Van Helsing believed that Lucy had become one of the undead, a vampire. For the first time, Seward slowly began to believe him. Van Helsing said that Lucy was different from other vampires. According to him, Dracula first attacked Lucy while she was sleepwalking. She died while in a trance-like state. Because of this, she became undead in a different way. Usually vampires look evil while resting, but Lucy still looked sweet and innocent. That made this situation even more painful. Van Helsing said, "There is no evil on her face. That is why it is hard for me to destroy her." Seward felt cold with fear. He realized he was beginning to accept the impossible truth. Seward asked, "How will you do this terrible work?" Van Helsing answered, "I shall cut off her head, fill her mouth with garlic, and drive a stake through her body." Seward shuddered. He had once loved Lucy. The idea of harming her body was horrifying, yet he also feared what she had become. Van Helsing did not act immediately. He stopped and thought carefully. Then he decided to wait. He said Arthur needed to see the truth for himself. If Seward had struggled to believe, then Arthur would struggle even more. Van Helsing worried that Arthur might think Lucy had been buried alive. Van Helsing had gone mad. They had murdered Lucy. He wanted Arthur to witness everything before they acted. He said, he must pass through bitter waters to reach peace. So Van Helsing decided to call Arthur, to invite Quincey Morris, to return the next night. Only then would they do what was necessary. Back at the Berkeley Hotel, Van Helsing wrote a letter to Seward. It was not delivered. The letter said he would spend the night alone in the cemetery. He would seal Lucy's tomb using garlic and a crucifix. He hoped to prevent Lucy from leaving the tomb. However, he warned that Dracula himself might appear. Van Helsing described Dracula as extremely clever, very powerful, strong as 20 men, able to command wolves, and dangerous beyond imagination. If Van Helsing died, he asked Seward to read Jonathan Harker's diaries, hunt Dracula, destroy him by cutting off his head, burning his heart, or driving a stake through it. He ended with a farewell, preparing himself for the possibility that he might never return.